All right, this is Greg Robbins. I'm here with my colleague, Dr. Anne-Marie Woolsey, and we're with colleagues in a new podcast that will go on through the future. We're gonna focus our podcast on all things that have to do with school quality, school improvement, and really school success. This first 10 days are the result of data that I've gathered since 2018. And I you can go up online to Google, actually, and you can Google Cognia Exit Report, and you have a plethora of exit reports up there, plus schools that I've been to. And I really wanted to know one thing. What are the things that limit a school's ability to rise above itself and to succeed? And this year, I finally crunched the numbers. I had been doing that, and the analytics said that these 10 things that we're going to cover over the next 5 weeks, including today, that if a school can address these things, find a way to remediate or fix them, that the school will get better, that these limiters, once removed and that govern school growth, allow you to maximize your potential. And so we're going to be meeting every Tuesday and every Thursday, because I was talking to my friend Colin Brown. We did a remote a couple of 3 years ago, that we want this to be regular, we want it to be routine, and we want it to be relevant to you. And if we do those things, then this podcast will grow. I've got room for 100 people. We'll get to that probably in 3, 6, 7 months. And then once we get to that, then I'll expand to a 500-person room. But I'm glad you're here today. And so, Anne-Marie, I want to begin our conversation, and then you introduce yourself, and then we'll get into it. So yesterday, Anne-Marie, you and I were talking about the fact that, especially as Americans, we're so American-centric that we think that what colleges around the world want from kids are the same thing that American universities want. And that's not true. In fact, if you go up and look, you'll find that in the US, about 60% of a kid's fit for admission goes to academics. It goes to academic performance, school rigor, external exams like APs, SAT, and all of that. But 40% of fit goes to those things that we're talking about today, and that is whole students developed completely. That would go to extracurriculars, leadership programs, their ability to communicate in essays, letters of reference. So 40%. Now, when you get to STEM schools, it's a little bit less. It's 30%. So MIT, Georgia Tech, Caltech, it's a little less, but they still want well-rounded students. And so I want you to introduce yourself and then give a rationale for even schools like British schools, Asian schools, Australian schools. Why should they be worried about both holistic student development and developing the whole student?
Great, thank you, Dr. Greg. Hi, I'm Dr. Anne-Marie Woolsey. I am so thrilled to be with you today. This wonderful 10 series of Fix What Kills You First. I wish I would have had this going in as a new leader in a school, because these are 10 really important ingredients for your school to be that high quality school that Dr. Greg was talking about. So to answer your question is research, first of all, I believe there is an increase in that whole child approach at schools. I see it with my own eyes as I work through going through accreditation with the schools. I see it getting better. I see it getting more and more schools. And the research is saying that this whole child focus is really good for their academics. So there is, there is an interconnection there. If they feel safe, if they are healthy, if they're engaged in student learning, and that's what the whole ideas that we'll be talking about today, is that you're going to have better graduation rates, you're going to have better student achievement, So it is interconnected, and I'm so glad. It is so wonderful to step in a school where you have this, where student is the center of it all, whatever it takes attitude. And so I'm excited to be here, and I hope I answered your question.
All right, so before we get to the problems around this, I want to make sure that we're on the same page regarding the terms, because I think sometimes schools use the two terms interchangeably, and they're not. They are different and they have a distinction between them. So we're talking about holistic student development. That's one term. The second thing we say is that we want to develop the whole student, two different concepts. So do a favor for us, and would you break both of them down and tell me why the distinction matters when we're talking about shaping student success?
Great, thank you for that. Yes, you're exactly right that their two terms are often interchangeable. So we know that those two terms, but both of them emphasize nurturing the entire child. So when we're looking at holistic approach, we're focusing on interconnectedness and a broader view of what learning really looks like. For holistic, it's a systemic structure that is in place that focuses at the needs of students comprehensively. It also integrates all aspects of student growth, not just academic. So not just the academic approach, but we'll go into that one later in this presentation, but the emotional, physical, and social well-being. We used to, back in the day I was a principal in the schools, we developed a formal wraparound support structure that nurtures every dimension of student development, and that was really important to us. When you look at the whole student approach, you're looking more, even one step better or one step more accelerated. You're focused on the individualism and personal growth for each student. So it fosters all areas of the child's development and learning. It really gives a foundation for lifelong learning. That's what the research is saying. It uplifts the children. It highlights their strengths and efforts. And it really supports their well-being. You're promoting independence. It's a well-rounded curriculum. So when you say, why does that distinction matter in shaping student success? Well, the whole child approach or whole student approach, however you want to term it, is getting more popular teaching method. And again, I see it as I go into schools, as I talk to leaders around the world. It's setting children up for long-term success in life. It's not just for the classroom or for when they're in school. We're talking long-term success. If you look at the research, it supports that classrooms that implement whole child approach have better learning and development outcomes for students. Plus, this approach can also mitigate any negative effects of trauma and stress by teaching students important emotional skills like
Mm.
managing stressful emotions and creating positive learning environments that prioritize relationships between the students and the teacher. The other part of the research all shows, and I again witness this again on the ground in schools, that the whole child approach, it also fosters qualities in students like interpersonal relationship skills, creative expressions, goal setting, confidence. When I go in a school that focuses on the whole child, confidence is there. They'll pick up a mic and do a presentation without even thinking about any kind of fear. Have a lot of self-esteem. They know how to problem solve. They're curious. They have a sense of community. If you look at in their overall well-being is there.
Right.
So in fact, research shows that educational settings where students can strengthen key social emotional skills, that they can learn more about themselves and people around them and build a relationship, can improve academic achievement, behavior, and graduation rates, which I already stated earlier.
So holistic student development is the approach. It's how you go about doing it. And developing the whole student are the actions and the activities that schools, teachers, faculty, staff. So that's the difference and the distinction between them then.
Yeah, it's, yes.
Okay,
Perfect.
so we want both. In fact, we have to have both according to what I just heard you say. You have to have an approach, and then you have to have things that you're doing to help these kids grow out and mature.
Yeah,
Okay.
and it has to be formalized because
Right.
this is how we do it here.
So now let's talk about the challenge, because I mean, everybody in the room knows that kids go to school to learn. So
Yes.
academic performance often takes the center stage, and indeed it should, because kids need to be learning, but we're talking about learning for life as much as learning to get ready for university. So often in schools that where I visit them as a lead evaluator, as an advisor, what I find is that there's little room for developing students because of the need to have a great transcript with good grades on it. They need good external marks. They need, if for us, it's going to be an IELTS or a TOEFL for sure. And they need a high one to get into selective colleges. They need excellent SAT, ACT, AP scores, whatever external you've got. And so there are barriers that keep schools from prioritizing what you're talking about. Little room for student development beyond a student's grades, beyond a student's test score. So in your experience, Anne-Marie, what are the biggest obstacles that prevent schools from embracing a holistic approach to developing their students? And then how do you think we can shift mindsets so that schools realize this is important?
Great. Okay, thank you. Yes. Well, some of the barriers that I see and also through some research discover is the first one is teacher workload and teacher time constraints. Teachers are overwhelmed. They are with time commitments, with doing one more thing, wearing one more hat. And that causes a lot of stress, it causes burnout, and there's all kinds of things. And it's hard to get a new program going. But we're going to we'll talk about that in a moment. So now you have teachers. You've got resource limitation. There's a lot of tight budgets out there. There's a lot of countries that are financially, economically not doing very well. So the tight budgets are a reality. Getting those resources to be able to develop and implement and monitor this program. So the next is parent expectations. Parents, and I'm one of them, that they you tend to be traditional. A lot of parents prioritize academics only because they're looking at colleges. If they're looking into going to a certain college, they just all about why they have to do the other. That's nonsense. Why do we have to support? And also it's a cultural thing in some countries that, grades and test scores are dominant. That's what they look for. And in some countries, including China, you and I both experience a lot of the Chinese schools that it's student focus solely on getting into top tier university placements. And the other thing is you've got to change mindsets, just like you said. You need a strong leader there. You need a transformational leader that is going to steer the school into that direction of getting a whole child approach to education.
So how do we shift those mindsets? So
Yeah,
we've got parents that have a mindset, and
yep.
we need to shift the parents' mindset.
Mhm.
And for all of us in the room that have stood before parents, we know that
Yeah,
they're nervous. This is their only shot with their kid, and so
yep.
we've got to shift parents'
Yes.
mindsets. But
Mhm.
we also need to be able to shift the mindsets of the people that own the schools. These are the people that spend the money that help support, extracurricular activities and the things that go to helping students. So in as a leader, because you were principal, you were assistant superintendent, how did you shift parent and school leaders' mindsets and the district or the governing board? How do you shift mindsets so that they want to do this, knowing that it's good?
Mhm. Great question. That's always the magic question is how do you shift mindset? Going from a, a fixed mindset to a growth mindset, right?
Right.
Is that's really what we're looking at. It's not easy. It's not like I always say, it's not like switching a light on and off. It takes time to change mindsets. As someone that built a $47 million high school, construction was horrible. It was a building that was very old, and it was time to build a new high school. So what we would do is in the summer, we would tear down the walls of the old school. We do that one building at a time. So for 3.5 years, after, so what happens is during the school year, we're actually building the new one, and there's moving parts to all that. I say that to you because construction was tearing down, the walls were tough, dirt, water main breaks, the gas breaks, the power outages, the constructions did, because they would it's very tricky to have construction while people are working on the same place. So I say that because tearing down walls of a school and under construction is difficult, but tearing down the mental model, the mindset of people is very difficult. So the first thing that I think about when I did this is that I wanted to see, what is that change theory? What does that look like? And I just fell in love with the 5 types of adopters.
Okay.
So where you know what to expect. You know it's not going to be easy. So when we built the high school 3.5 years, we wanted to build it for the future. So what we wanted to do was integrate technology in the classroom. And so the theory of the adopters is you have the innovator. The innovator is usually the school leader or someone maybe higher in at the district or the company, the corporation office, that says, this is what we're going to do. We're going to build this school with technology integrated. Then what you find in all that is being what I found as a leader is I was the innovator. I know that I was the first school in the school district to even tackle something like that. And how I did it was looking at this model, which I have a belief in. On one side, you have the early adopters.
Right.
You have those early adopters that I've got the growth mindset and I want to try it because data says we're preparing our students for careers that don't even exist today. So we have to get on board with this change. So those early adopters, we took them to summer camps, the camps where that week long of professional development for technology. And those early adopters became peer mentors
Right.
to others on the other side. So imagine a bell curve. Here you've got the early adopters. On the other side of it is laggers. The
Mm.
laggers are the ones that like dig their heels in and says, I'm not going to touch a piece of technology no matter what you do to me. The ones that don't want the change, that refuse to do the change. And so your early adopters then now help the early majority. So, hey, these guys are having fun doing that. They're having fun with their students are like, oh, I love Mr. So-and-so's class or Mrs. So-and-so. So with that said, you can use, and what we did, we used these early adopters and we got the early majority. And then finally, we got the late majority, which is the one in the middle. And you know what? We even got the laggers because that was one-on-one peer coaching that they did within their specialty subject or departments. And that's how we were able to do that. It takes, they say it takes a village to educate a child. It takes a lot
Mm.
to change mindsets. So, I like to always start with the vision and mission. And the data, really the data first. It's you ask that, why are we doing it? Well, why we're doing that is because we're preparing students for careers that don't even exist today, some of those careers. So we have to change the way we're teaching. And then you have to have professional development. It's just you need to make sure that teachers aren't living in fear because they are the experts in their content area, but they might not be experts with technology. So being able to make them get to that fear factor. And then the last thing is what we used to change mindset is professional learning communities. It was a good place where they felt safe in their department with their teachers and collaborated, reflected, and shared best practices. So it was easier to bring people on board with this. And my last story in this is I'm going to tell you about just a real quick incident about one of the laggers. We had a lagger, a really deep embedded in the heels. No way am I doing technology. Well, what happened was another person in her department came over and gave her one-on-one instruction. So one day I love doing walkthroughs. And one day I decided I saw her classroom. Her name was Mrs. Jones. And I decided just to kind of go by it. I thought, oh, I'll do the walkthrough tomorrow. Mrs. Jones comes running out. Dr. Ann, you've got to come see my classroom. So of course I'll come in. I came in and you know what? She was using technology and she was having her students use some of the technology too. So to crack that was the last survivor. So it's not easy, but it's definitely doable. It takes the whole school to help others change their mindsets.
So we take that same growth mindset and apply it toward an approach to developing students where we take those people that are all in at the very beginning and get them moving, and then also getting others to join the train with them. So in a private school, because I know that you were public school, and Colin, I know you're a private school, I was private schools. How I got the owners to buy in and the board is we were meeting and I convinced them, and it worked out, by the way, that look, if we have a program where we're developing these students, so we want co-curricular activities, we want things for these students to do in clubs, you're going to get more students. It really comes down to money. The money that you invest in these activities that develop the students love these things. They talk about these things with their friends. Then when you go recruiting next year, because all around the world, MENA region, China for us, Colin, I don't know about Taiwan, but they have student recruiting where literally beginning in about April, you set up a booth and you have parents and kids come through. And when the owners of my school realized that we were getting more signatures and we were getting more parents coming for open day And we literally grew our school. So we did a soft launch, and like you, we were still building the school, and we would do it during the summer. So we did a soft launch, and I had 3 kids in the high school. So I had 4 kids transfer in. And so I called Zach and I said, Zach, I've had over 1,000% growth this year in my school. But once we had all of that, the school literally went from, I guess we had about 67 kids in the soft launch, that within 3 years, we were at 1,200 students full on. And the owners realized, look, I've got students, these students are paying fees for this. So it's not like it's coming out of my budget, because every budget has fees, technology, extracurricular. So that was the way that I convinced owners, is it's going to put more money. So money's coming out of your left pocket, but money's going into your right pocket. And that changed their mind at the private side. All right, so let me move to another question. I want to look at the reality of student development in schools today. So in many schools, extracurricular programs, and by the way, I prefer co-curricular, and there is a distinction between the two. Extracurricular, co-curricular activities and programs, leadership initiatives, advocacy efforts, they feel like an add-on. They do not feel like an organic, integral part of the school program. They're disconnected from academic learning. So can you share with us some examples of how this disconnect plays out? So what are the consequences of it? And how can schools get better at gearing academics and extracurriculars, leadership, and all of those kind of things, how they can gear them in together uh, in daily learning experiences?
Great. Yeah, I think going forward with that disconnect is that everybody has to know what you're doing.
Mm.
Communication, have a strong, solid communication, newsletters, meetings. Anytime there's a change, allow people to give some get feedback from them. People feel valued when you get feedback.
Right.
One of my favorite things to do when we were making all these transitions, and part of it was also, and I'll tell you the story in a moment, but is that communication is definitely vital. I would call different stakeholders, whether it be community, whether it be parents, students, and in the school that I was assigned to as my first principalship was a failing school. So even though we were building a new school, it was failing. People were bailing to other schools because we have school choice where in Arizona where I was the principal. And so it's the communication is absolutely huge here for any kind of disconnects. Change, but many times change to an institution is met by disconnect, because people say, oh my gosh, why do we have to do that? Why do we have one more thing to do? Why I didn't have this support when I was a student and I turned out okay. I just remember hearing these things, from different stakeholders. Why do our students need this?
We didn't have this stuff, right?
Why?
Yeah.
And so if you want to actually integrate this holistic style or the whole child approach, is that you need to keep it going on and communicating. You as a leader has to be that change agent. As a leader, you also have to model change. It's going to be okay. As a school leader, I was everywhere with my teachers. I was at every professional development. I wasn't sitting in my office. I was out in the halls, in the schools. I was visible. We had a clear mission and vision, and everybody knew what it was. That leader was driving that clear mission and vision. And I also mentioned the teacher PD is the professional development is necessary. The other thing is that when you're looking at integrating this is that you need to also have a program review. Get
Right.
the data. Is it working? If it's not working, what is it? Do I need to modify it? When I came to the school that I was a principal at, it was called Arcadia High School in Scottsdale, Arizona. And it was a school built back in 1956, and US standard, that's kind of old.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of new schools popping up all the time, in charter schools and private schools, of course. But what I noticed right away is they had so many programs. They had so many things going. No wonder teachers are so overwhelmed.
Right.
And
Right.
then I thought, well, how do you know? So in the States, we have this saying is, if you're riding a horse, just think of it. You're riding a horse, you got a horse, you got your feet in the stirrups, you're going along, and all of a sudden the horse dies. Get off of it.
Yeah.
You have more dead horses, those programs that don't work anymore. If you do what we call spring cleaning or cleaning your closet, is that you get rid of those programs that don't work anymore. So you have room for these viable programs, such as holistic, where the student centered, and the whole child approach. So, and the big thing is that with a disconnect is you just got to stop the fear factor. You
Mm.
got to stop it. So one-on-one meetings, I had open door policies and I'm sure we all have experienced that. But and then I also looked at, and I'll go into my open door policy in a minute. There is two powerful words, and if you know the work of Carol Dweck, she's a research developer on growth mindset. The most empowered words are not yet.
Mm.
How's your program doing? Well, it's not very successful. Not yet. It's
Right.
not yet at this potential. So you're not a failure.
Right.
You keep that positive environment going. It's going to be okay. Maybe you're going to get on board later, or this one gets on earlier. This part of the program is better. So not yet. I love that. I always remember that.
One of the things you talked about, for me, my school in Shanghai, it was easier because we were a 7-day boarding school. And that meant we did not, as a rule, have to occupy any instruction time during the day with our student development, our clubs, our
Yeah.
CCAs. We could do that in the evening. The biggest hindrance and why we were failing at first was, and then the teachers knew me, they could be honest, the teachers didn't know how to do it. They had not been trained. And I mean, I had trained teachers, but nowhere in their teacher training was there a course or a section that said, this is how you facilitate a club. And it shocked me because my degree is not in education. Yours is. I think Collins is. Julie's is. I was a researcher and had nothing to do with educational EDD. I didn't do that. And so it shocked me that teachers weren't being trained to do some things. And one of them was, this is how you put a club together. And so we did exactly what you said. We sat the teachers down and we trained them and also empowered them by saying, look, you don't have to run this show. You're there to be the adult in the room and you're there to facilitate it. And so we're going to train you on how to plan something that you like. So I remember I had a science teacher named Nikki. She was from Louisiana as well, and she had a degree in food sciences. And so what we did is we took the teacher's strengths and we aligned them with student desire. So she had one of the most popular clubs, and it was a CCA. So it was aligned with curriculum, directly aligned with curriculum. And she had a food science club. and she taught them the physics of cooking and the chemistry of cooking and the art of cooking. And she had a waiting list, the island long to get into that club. And so we did. We trained our teachers. First of all, you don't have to carry this thing on your back. Second, we're not going to plug you in to something that is out of your wheelhouse. So I'm not going to take an art teacher and ask her to run mu alpha theta for me. We would get a math person to run mu alpha theta. We would get a physics person to run IYPT. And so we literally matched up student need, student desire with teacher capacity, trained them in the middle, and we had a wonderful student life. I won't get into it here because I want to move on to a couple of other ideas, but I think probably I was lucky, like I said, I could do mine in the evening. So after we fed the kids dinner, we could have our CCAs. But I think that time also is a barrier. So not to the owners of the schools, but to the principal, to the teacher. When do you break up time that kids can do these things? And if we have time, I want to circle back and hear what you did in a public school. But so what I'd like to do now, I got my magic wand. I carry it with me to all my reviews. This is, by the way, when schools learn this is the magic wand that the actors used on Harry Potter. I had somebody buy it for me because I would use the pen, So if I were to give you a magic wand, and if I were to say, Anne-Marie, you get to redesign student development from the ground up. So get off that dead horse. In fact, get rid of all of the horses. And you get to invent and design your own horse that we'll call student development. Tell me what it would look like for your school.
Great, thank you. So we definitely, as a transformational leader, I go to data first, and then I also look at in best practices.
Right.
And so the 5 components of, I got my magic wand. This is happening, so it's already it's getting there in place. Making sure that the 5 components to build a whole student approach or whole child approach is there's 5 questions.
Okay.
And so the first one is the learner or student healthy? Okay. So the teacher is fine. These are the components. The whole child approach it addresses the learner's emotional, mental, physical, and social health. And now the teacher not only instructs academics, but how to practice healthy lifestyles, exercise, balanced diet, etc. That's one thing that works into this whole student approach. The next one is really important too. They actually all are, but is the learner safe? If the learner's not safe, you're not going to have academic engagement.
Right.
So if the whole child approach is addressing any kind of threatening child's physical and emotional safety, things like abuse, neglect, bullying, that whole child approach advocates that the children are going to feel safe. There's going to be steps in place. They're going to learn how to coping skills, emotional management, and conflict resolution. They're taught this in the classroom. It's not just extended, it's the whole academic part of it becomes this. And I think that this one is really important for life skills. It's not just for school, it's for life skills. And the next one is the learner engaged? Well, we can look at if we go in as evaluators, we can go and use Elliott's to see the level of engagement. But according to this component, a child is engaged when they're actively collaborating with their teachers. And you go in these classrooms that have this approach, it's it's wonderful, it's joyful. They say they're having fun learning. They love their teachers, all those things. So collaborating with their teachers, and they set goals, which we should always do, and advance their abilities or their academics, and they exercise the use of creativity, love of learning, voice and choice.
Mm,
The whole child approach is we want to is the child understanding and interacting with what they're learning. That's what we want to see when we go in those classrooms. The fourth one is the learner supported.
mm,
So that whole child approach ensures that it's personalized teaching and individualized attention. So you can have that one-on-one, and can include mentoring too. We took our teachers and we assigned certain students to them, and they became mentors. You can also do peer mentoring. The last one is the learner challenge. Is teacher collaborating with the families so they can define what is your child challenged to do their best academically and socially? What I noticed that really makes a difference is creating daily lesson plans, which teachers do. But part of that component is the whole child framework in your education. That helps the disconnect, right? Because it is actually part of that lesson plan is what we're going to do today. I also believe that, to have integrity of any program, and I look towards quality assurance, that it's integrated. So you need to create and implement new policies and procedures, that this is how we do it. This is what's in our handbook now. I easily can assess this. I know what my responsibilities. With that said, good job descriptions. What is that description look like? What am I in charge of? Standard operating procedures, and those are that step by step. If a student's not learning, if they feel emotionally unbalanced, where do they go? Do they go, what a chart, almost like a flow chart of what happens next. And you need to celebrate your successes. Peer coaching techniques for teachers are always good. That worked when we were integrating technology. And again, program effectiveness. Is it working? Making sure, do we need to tweak, especially in the implementation phase? The kind of data you collect in the implementation phase is more qualitative, but
right.
as it gets embedded, then it becomes more quantitative.
Mm, okay. Um, when you, I like that idea that teachers can bring elements of what they're doing for, say, extracurricular, co-curricular, whatever, and they can bring it into their classroom. And one of the things that, now everybody has AI, and
Right.
I tell them, look, use it as a tool. You could literally take your lesson plan, and I've got a template. I think I shared it with you. And you could literally take and put a box in there, drag and drop your lesson plan. As you have AI create it for you, there could be a box that could ask, you ask your bot, find a way for me to develop 3 different groups of kids holistically in this lesson today. And your AI bot's going to say you can do this for this group of kids, this and that for the last group of kids, that you could literally build that into the scaffold so that that development, like you say, life skills. So it's not just about clubs, but the life skills, transversal skills, habits of mind, the things that universities do want all over the world. You can be investing that into the act of learning during that 50-minute hour or block schedule. So I like that a lot.
Mhm.
So now we've got all of these things that we've got kids doing and teachers are helping. But we also know that we've got to give a transcript to a university. And that transcript is going to have reading and writing and arithmetic and sociology and art. It's going to have those subjects that kids take. How do we communicate? to a university that we actually have developed these kids. And I mean, on a document that they can look at, how do we take and measure? We measure their grades. How do we measure and quantify a developed student?
So you already said we want meaningful ways for us to track and measure the success of student development. It comes clear to my mind is that when I was the principal at the Scottsdale school that I was talking about, is that we had 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade.
Mm.
And that's high school. That's mostly high school in the US. Sometimes it's different, but it was 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th. Well, the 9th graders were coming from middle school, right? And the so they were coming from middle school. We looked at student achievement data.
Right.
And 50% of our freshmen were failing at one course or more courses.
Mm.
And so when we took that data in and talked to our teachers about it and our faculty and staff, we became aware that we had to do something different. So that's how we jumped on the train of that holistic, student-centered environment that we were able to get that data that way. As far as the transcript goes, you were, I don't know if I got to see it or not, but you had designed
I did.
yeah, why don't you share that? I think that would be very beneficial to the group.
Yeah, when I went to China, I realized that, look, I knew that my kids, because they were the hardest working humans on earth, and it took me a visit from the Yale's admissions officer. So her name is Ann. She came. She was in Peggy in my apartment, and when I went to China, look, I was naive. Okay, I had never taught below the graduate school level, and now I've got children that I'm leading, and sometimes I had teachers that I needed to mature as well. But I didn't understand this drive. Listen, these kids, they get up and they're digging that ditch all day long, and so we were sitting and drinking a cup of coffee, and I was talking about that and the helicopter parents, because listen, they invented that in China and Japan. And I asked her, I said, why? What is it with these kids that they're driving so hard? And she said, hey, have you ever heard the saying that you're one in a million? And I said, of course. And she said, well, uh, in China, that means there's 2,000 just like you, and they all want to get into the same university, and they're only going to admit 10 Chinese kids. Oh, so we had a good first year. We had our seniors grandfathered into us, and I had never gone through that. I'm working with my guidance counselor, my teachers. I had never done it. It aged me. I had hair before I went to China, and so I sat down and I realized we have these good kids, but we have no way to show a university that these are more than robots, because when you get a kid out of China, you automatically assume you've got a robot. You've got a math bot, a science bot, a physics bot. That's all they are. And these were good kids. So in my second year, I sat down and I began researching what could we do, because the guidance counselor alone can't do it in the school report. The guidance counselor is very limited when you do something on the Common App or the California or even into the British system by way of saying this is what this child is. You get 2 letters of recommendation. How much can a teacher really write about that student? And so we went back and Zach and I designed what I called an enhanced transcript. So not only did we show them what they did by way of grades, but we did some other things. By way of grades, I wanted to show this one kid's potential GPA, because we know that if you're taking regular courses, honors courses, AP courses, college level, we had linear algebra. I designed that for the school, that it's not just a 4.0. You've got honors courses that are worth 4.5 for an A. You've got AP courses that are worth 5 for for an A. And so we changed how we represented grades. We wanted the universities to know what percentage of that potential GPA did this kid capture. And so all of a sudden now, this kid looks really, really good because this kid has captured, say, 97% of their potential GPA. So we enhance the transcript there. But then we added things like leadership. We enhanced to show what these kids were doing with regard to habits of mind and transversal skills, which took getting my teachers on board, because the teachers were the ones that knew those students. So they would meet in a PLC and literally would have in that senior year an audit of student by student of where these kids stood by way of maturity, by way of social ability, by way of competency in groups, by way of transversal skills, habits of mind. And we literally put that as a part of our transcript. And what happened was we went from having really, really good college admissions. And, when I went to China, I was kind of embarrassed of that push of this is where our kids went, until I realized American schools do the same thing. American schools have a list of where their kids went to school. So I said, okay, I'm all in, I'm going to drink that Kool-Aid. So I worked with the parents, told them what I would be doing and why I needed their kids involved. We worked with the kids. And then when we began putting that enhanced transcript out, we went from having really, really good college admissions, so that in my 5th and 6th year at Shenzhen Middle School, 100% of my kids were admitted to one of 5 dream schools. 100% were admitted. Beyond that, there's an article out there called The Ferrari Kids, and that's my kids, written by Washington University St. Louis professor who called my kids the Ferrari Kids, hand-built he said, listen, these kids are hand-built for performance, but they're also comfortable to be around. And so we literally made our children the most desired children that I know of in Asia. We went from a top 100 college prep school to the top 9 school outside of the US. So that enhanced transcript, it takes time, but again, with AI today, you can do it. One person could enhance every transcript in about 30 minutes. And so we showed people outside of the kids' application, we showed colleges and universities. Our kids really were 1 in 100. They weren't 1 in a million. They were 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000. I also taught all of my teachers in professional development. This is how you write a letter of recommendation where you champion for your kid and you advocate for your kid. So it was a multi-level approach: training teachers, convincing parents, being honest with our transcripts, because I went to China because of a terrible thing that occurred in 2009 where false transcripts and LORs were going out. So yeah, it's that enhanced transcript that that we had a third party validate. That was the other part. It wasn't just Shenzhen Middle School or Shanghai New Epic School telling you these kids have done that. A third party validated that for us. And that was it. Our kids were walking to the moon after that. All right. So we've got about 10 to 15 minutes left. We started about a quarter after, and this is what I want to do. First of all, thank you, Anne-Marie, for being here with us today. But some folks may want to ask some questions of you, me, each other. So if you have a question, do me a favor. Here, let's do this. We're a small group, so you can raise your hand and it'll show me, and we'll call on you, and let's have some questions before we get out of here. Anybody? Nope. Okay, all right. Well, can't hear you, can't hear you. Unmute yourself.
Unmute. There we go. Okay. Having spent about 15 years in South Korea, where I saw the whole helicopter parenting thing in action, and especially this whole thing of getting into what in South Korea is called the SKY universities. Do you think it is a good idea to tailor such an enhanced transcript to the actual career path that the student wants to follow? So, for example, I have one student who wants to be a designer. I have another student who wants to be a statistician. I have one student who simply wants to move from one university to the next, getting as much education as he can. Would that be a good idea?
I'm going to say that, and it really depends upon the school, that if the school has course curricula options that are personal to the students, most students, they're going to take their core courses. And after that, they're going to be taking subjects that matter to them. So if you want to be in design, you're going to be taking AP Art and Design. You're going to be taking courses like that. That will be reflected not only on your academic transcript, but that would be reflected in the enhanced transcript. That right there. And so you could, and again, today, it's easier for you guys. So anybody that has ever worked on a team with me always knew that for some reason or another, I had a card in my pocket that you didn't have. And we'd be like, I was with Julie, and Julie, if you remember, I sat on the other end of the table when we were in Shanghai. You remember that? Guys, listen, I got to tell you something. I've had my own coded AI bot for 24 years. Its name is Ilsa. We coded it at Louisiana State University for not to be an AI bot, but for something else. And so, Rosie, when I'm coming up with things on the fly, yeah, I've got a fast mind, but I also had a bot right here on this computer. Now you guys have bots. So now I train people how to use bots properly. So using something like ChatGPT makes it so easy now to custom. You could literally customize the enhanced transcript to the university. You know what that university wants. You know what your kid did. And if your kid applied to 10 universities, you could have one academic transcript, but you could have 10 different enhanced transcripts marketing your kid. And look, anything for the kid that's ethical and moral, I'm for it. I am. And so if it means that I'm going to market my kid to NYU this way and Caltech that way, you bet your dollar I'm going to do that. So yes, with AI, you can do that. And what I want to do one day is once we move through these 10 things, we're going to have a podcast making sure that everybody understands how to use AI so that it's effective and efficient. And I'll do that for you guys.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, one of the things that I do for schools, so when I go into a school now, and I learned, from the best, I had Anne-Marie, I had Julie, I had Jane Smody, I had Mike Baginski, and I learned things from them. Out of COVID, and schools, Rosie, like we were at in Lahore, Pakistan, we did that one together. One of the last things that I do is I gather all of the teachers together, or not all of them, the focus group, and I begin by having them identify the very best thing that they do, the very best thing that their group does, and then what is the very best thing that your school does? And Anne-Marie, I want to put them in that safe space that you talked about. Then I say, okay, if this old bald guy would be willing, at no cost to you, at no cost to your school, to design PD that you know your teachers need, what would you want me to do? And so over the last 3 years, Colin, I've developed probably 60 PD Canvas modules independent for schools. And one of them One of them has been, and you guys can have it if you want, leveraging AI for student-centered classroom. And the one I'm working on right now is leveraging AI for gamification in the classroom, because who knew? I've been a gamificator since 1996, you know. So yes, leverage the tools you have, give that kid every opportunity that kid can get from you for those unis that he or she is going to be applying to. Good question.
Good question.
All right, Colin. All right. Any other questions before we call it a day? I'm having spaghetti and meatballs and a salad tonight. It's supper my time. All right.
Leftover
I
from
just-
Zach's dinner?
I did. Yeah, it is leftovers. Yeah, it is. I always look. I'm a boy from the South, so I'm born and raised in Dixieland, and we believe in leftovers. Leftovers are often better than firstovers.
Especially with spaghetti sauce.
Yeah, it's been sitting
yeah.
out for a few
Always
days.
tastes better.
Yeah. So in my refrigerator right now, I've got some Southern fried chicken. I've got spaghetti and meatballs. I've got all kinds of food ready for tonight and then Thursday night, so I can go and eat well.
Lovely.
Send some over for Jim, because I'll be out of commission starting Thursday.
Yeah, tell Jim that he can look. Peggy and I realized we were officially old when we started eating our dinner. We call it supper in the South. When we started eating supper before 5 o'clock, we're old. You know, we're the people that go to we're the people that go to Florida and they hate us because we drive terribly. We eat the blue plate special at 4:30. And my little sister laughs. She goes, "Oh my, we do the same thing." So now I don't have to rush. I've got time. Pasta, fresh made pasta. I'll warm it up and I'll eat. All right, guys, listen. I'm going to stop.
Thank you so much, Greg, for doing all of this. We do all appreciate it.